She mistook a millionaire single dad for the school janitor. But that mistake changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The morning sun spilled across the courtyard of St. Augustine Elementary School, catching on the wet pavement after a light drizzle. The bell had not yet rung, but the halls already hummed with the sound of teachers greeting students, sneakers squeaking, laughter echoing down the corridor. Inside classroom 12, Elena Morgan, a new substitute teacher, was struggling with the banner that kept slipping from the top of the chalkboard. "Stay up, please," she muttered, standing on her tiptoes and stretching the tape as far as it would go. Her ponytail swayed, and a smudge of chalk streaked her cheek. The banner, which read "Kindness is never wasted," drooped again. She sighed and turned, spotting a tall man by the doorway in a gray maintenance uniform, holding a mop. "Oh, thank goodness. Can you help me for just a second?" she asked with relief. The man looked up, surprised. He had broad shoulders, dark hair still damp from the rain, and kind eyes that studied her for a moment before he nodded silently. Without a word, he crossed the room, took the tape, and fixed the banner neatly against the wall with one swift movement. "Perfect," Elena said, smiling wide. "You must be new here. I have not seen you around before." "Look." He glanced at her, lips curving faintly. "You could say that," he answered. "I am Elena," she said cheerfully, brushing chalk dust off her sleeve. "It is my first week teaching here. I swear everything that can go wrong has already gone wrong. The heater in the teacher's lounge is broken, my markers are dry, and now this banner." Her words tumbled out in a rush, nerves spilling over. The man listened quietly, arms crossed, eyes calm and amused. "Well, the banner looks fine now," he said. His voice carried an ease that steadied her somehow. "Thanks to you, mister?" she prompted. He hesitated, then simply said, "Andrew." "Thank you, Andrew," she replied, still assuming he was the school janitor. "I owe you one." He just smiled and nodded once, glancing at the quote on the banner before walking toward the door. "Kindness is never wasted," he read softly. "That is a good one." Elena laughed lightly. "It is my favorite saying. Children need to be reminded that small acts matter. Sometimes adults do too." Andrew paused at the threshold, his expression unreadable. "You are right about that," he said quietly before leaving the room. For a few seconds, Elena watched the doorway, confused by how composed he seemed, how unlike any janitor she had ever met. Then the bell rang, jolting her back to reality. Students began to rush in, backpacks bouncing, chatter filling the air. By the time she turned back, Andrew was gone. Only the faint scent of rain and a perfect banner remained. Outside, across the courtyard, Andrew Cole walked toward the black sedan waiting near the faculty lot. The driver opened the door for him, but he stopped for a moment, glancing back at classroom 12. Through the window, he could see Elena laughing with the children, her hands moving animatedly as she helped them hang their coats. He smiled faintly. To everyone else, Andrew was Andrew Cole, the founder of the Cole Foundation and the school's most generous benefactor. But this morning, he had simply been a man with a mop, caught off guard by a woman who treated him like a person instead of a headline. And for reasons he could not explain, he found himself wanting to see that banner again. The next morning, the sound of rain against the window pulled Elena from a restless sleep. Her alarm buzzed at 6 o'clock, the cheap digital clock flashing its tired red numbers. She blinked twice, then sat up slowly on the narrow bed of her small one-room apartment. The air smelled faintly of coffee and damp plaster. The roof leaked when it rained, and the bucket beside her desk already held half an inch of water. She rubbed her eyes and exhaled, glancing around the cramped space. A second-hand dresser, a chipped mirror, and a tiny kitchen counter lined with grocery store instant noodles. On the wall hung her one treasure, a sketch of a classroom drawn in pencil, framed by a note in a child's handwriting that said, "Thank you, Miss Elena, for believing in me." She smiled faintly at it before getting ready for another day. Her morning routine was a quiet battle with time. She brewed instant coffee, pulled on her worn navy cardigan, and checked her phone. The notification from the school payroll app blinked on the screen. Temporary contract, 2 weeks remaining. A knot formed in her chest. She had exactly 14 days left to prove herself worthy of a permanent teaching position. 14 days to show she was more than the nervous substitute teacher who spilled chalk dust on her skirt. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wet asphalt and pine. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. She stood in the drizzle, clutching her bag to her chest as cars splashed past. When the bus arrived, it was already crowded. Students, parents, and early commuters pressed together in the narrow aisle. Elena found a spot near the back and stared out the fogged window, her reflection overlapping the gray morning streets of Willow Creek. Her mind replayed yesterday's scene again, the man in the gray uniform, the quiet smile, the way he had read her quote out loud. There had been something about him that did not fit the part of a janitor. The way he carried himself, calm but assured. Still, she pushed the thought aside. "Do not get distracted," she whispered to herself. "You need this job." When she arrived at St. Augustine Elementary School, the parking lot was full of gleaming cars. A silver sedan stopped near the gate, and a child stepped out wearing a designer coat. Elena caught herself comparing her own scuffed shoes to the polished black heels of another teacher who walked by without a greeting. It stung more than she wanted to admit. Inside the faculty room, the chatter was brisk. Teachers huddled in groups, discussing the upcoming Parent Appreciation Gala. Elena poured herself a cup of coffee, avoiding eye contact. A senior teacher named Miss Parker glanced over with a polite but cool smile. "You are the new substitute in classroom 12, right?" she said. "Yes, that is me," Elena replied softly. "Well," Miss Parker said, stirring her drink, "you might want to make a good impression this week. The Cole Foundation is reviewing which classes will keep funding. Their chairman is visiting soon." "The Cole Foundation?" Elena repeated, recognizing the name from the school brochures. "They fund the literacy program, right?" Miss Parker nodded. "And the art scholarships. Big deal around here. You will see him at the gala, Mr. Andrew Cole. He is very private, but when he visits, everyone stands a little straighter." She gave a knowing smirk before walking away. Elena stared at her coffee cup, heart sinking. Another reminder that this place was not built for people like her. Everyone here seemed to belong to the wealth, the polish, the confidence. She was the outsider holding a temporary badge and a second-hand laptop. By mid-morning, she was back in her classroom, guiding her students through multiplication problems. 4 times 6 equals 24, she said, drawing large, clear numbers on the board. The children echoed her answer with sleepy voices. When recess came, she sat at her desk, reviewing lesson plans. The heater groaned again, clicking uselessly. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup from the cafeteria, the paper soft from reuse. Then, from the hallway, she heard the sound of small footsteps in a boy's voice. "Miss Elena?" She looked up. It was Ben Cole, one of her quieter students. His dark hair curled slightly over his forehead. He held out a crumpled piece of paper. "My dad said I should give this to you. He said it is important." Elena smiled kindly and unfolded the paper. Inside was a simple thank you note written in neat adult handwriting. "Thank you for reminding us that kindness is never wasted." Her breath caught for a second. The quote from the banner. The man in the gray uniform. She looked down at the signature, Andrew Cole. The hallway buzzed with distant laughter, but all she could hear was the echo of his voice from yesterday. "That is a good one." Elena set the paper on her desk, heart racing in quiet confusion. She had mistaken him for the janitor, but if her guess was right, he was something else entirely. She looked toward the window. Outside, the sky was clearing, a thin ray of light breaking through the clouds. It fell across the chalkboard, illuminating the words still faintly visible beneath her morning lessons. "Kindness is never wasted." She whispered it again, softly this time, as if testing what it meant now. That evening, long after the last student had gone home, Elena stayed behind to tidy her classroom. The sun was melting into the horizon, pouring gold across the rows of tiny desks. The air smelled faintly of crayons and chalk dust. She stacked notebooks carefully, one by one, humming under her breath to fill the silence. When she reached the board, she noticed the small note again, the one from Andrew Cole. She ran her thumb over the neat handwriting. It was steady, confident, like someone used to signing big decisions. She thought about what Miss Parker had said in the teacher's lounge that morning. The Cole Foundation, the chairman, the one everyone stands straighter for. A nervous laugh escaped her lips. "There is no way," she whispered. "That man was holding a mop." Still, her heart would not let go of the thought. The way he had looked at her, the quiet intelligence in his eyes, the unspoken amusement as she thanked him for fixing the banner. She shook her head and erased the board, trying to chase the image away. The next day began like any other. Rain again, puddles reflecting the gray sky. The hallway buzzed with children's voices, backpacks thumping against lockers. Elena was preparing art supplies for her class when the intercom crackled. "Faculty reminder," said the principal's voice. "The Parent Appreciation Gala will be held this Friday evening. All teachers are expected to attend." Elena sighed quietly. A gala. She barely owned one decent dress. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and returned to sorting brushes into jars. That afternoon, Ben lingered after class. "Miss Elena, my dad says he might come by tomorrow," he said, zipping his backpack. "That is wonderful," she replied, smiling. "It will be nice to finally meet him." Ben's eyes lit up. "He liked your quote on the board. He said you remind him of my mom." Then he waved goodbye, leaving Elena speechless. When the final bell rang, the school emptied again. Elena gathered her lesson plans and stepped out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Down the corridor, she heard someone speaking softly. "Excuse me," she called, turning the corner. There he was. Andrew Cole stood near the trophy case, still dressed simply, this time in a button-down shirt and jeans. He was talking to the principal, who seemed both nervous and honored in his presence. Elena froze, the realization hitting her like a wave. He is not the janitor. He is the Andrew Cole. The principal noticed her and smiled stiffly. "Miss Morgan, perfect timing. Mr. Cole was just asking about your classroom. He visited yesterday with his son." Elena's cheeks warmed. "Yes, we met." Briefly. Andrew turned, his expression unreadable but gentle. "We did," he said. "You were wrestling with a banner." She laughed weakly, embarrassed. "So, you saw that." "I did," he said, eyes glinting with amusement. "You have a good message on that board. Kindness is never wasted. It stuck with me." The principal excused himself, leaving them alone. Elena tried to steady her voice. "I owe you an apology," she began. "I thought you were a janitor," he finished, smiling faintly. "You are not the first person to think that." "I am so sorry," she said quickly. "I would never have—" He raised a hand, stopping her. "Please, do not apologize." It was refreshing. People usually talk to me for what I can give them, not because they actually want to talk. The honesty in his tone surprised her. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the hallway quiet except for the faint hum of the vending machine. "You must be very proud of Ben," she said softly. "I am," Andrew replied, his gaze softening. "He has been through a lot since his mother passed. Teaching has not been easy for him, but he likes your class. He says you make him feel safe." Her chest tightened. "He is a wonderful boy, smart, curious, kind. You should be proud." "I am," he repeated, almost to himself. Silence settled again, gentle and unhurried. Finally, Andrew glanced at the clock. "I have to go, but I wanted to thank you properly. You reminded me that kindness still matters, even in places where people forget." Before she could respond, he extended his hand. She shook it, her fingers brushing his. His palm was warm, steady. "Good evening, Miss Morgan," he said quietly. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," she replied. As he walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing softly, Elena stood frozen, her mind spinning. Everything she thought she knew about him had shifted. She looked back toward her classroom door, where the faint chalk line of her quote still glowed under the flickering lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stir, hope, curiosity, maybe something more. Outside, the rain had stopped. The puddles on the playground reflected the fading sky, and in that reflection, she could almost see the words forming again in her mind. Kindness is never wasted. And now she knew it was not just a lesson for the children, it was a reminder for her too. Friday evening arrived, and the school that usually smelled of crayons and floor polish now glowed like a ballroom. White string lights wound up the columns, and the gymnasium floor gleamed under the chandeliers borrowed from a local event company. Teachers and parents filled the space in clusters, balancing paper cups of punch and polite conversation. Elena stood near the entrance, her palms slightly damp, clutching the strap of her small handbag. She wore a simple navy dress borrowed from her neighbor, the hem slightly frayed but pressed carefully. She had debated skipping the gala altogether, but duty and curiosity had won. She wanted to see if Andrew Cole would actually be here. Miss Parker spotted her first. "Miss Morgan, you clean up nicely," she said, her tone half compliment, half surprise. "Try to relax. The chairman's table is up front. And remember, appearances matter tonight." Elena smiled politely, trying to hide her discomfort. The hall buzzed with polite laughter and clinking glasses. On the far side of the room, a small stage had been set for speeches. The banner across the backdrop read, "Parent Appreciation Gala," sponsored by the Cole Foundation. She felt her heart skip a beat at the sight of the name. Then, through the crowd, she saw him. Andrew stood near the stage, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that somehow made him look both commanding and completely at ease. He was speaking with the principal, listening attentively while others hovered nearby, waiting for their chance to greet him. For a moment, Elena forgot to breathe. He looked nothing like the man with the mop she had met days ago. His presence filled the room effortlessly. Yet when his gaze lifted and found hers across the crowd, he smiled quiet, genuine, the same way he had in her classroom. Elena froze. She was not sure if she should approach or pretend she had not seen him. Before she could decide, the principal tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight we honor the families who make St. Augustine Elementary School such a special community. And of course, we extend our deepest gratitude to the Cole Foundation for their continued support." Polite applause followed. The principal turned toward Andrew. "Please welcome our chairman, Mr. Andrew Cole." The crowd erupted again, and Andrew stepped onto the stage. His expression remained calm, his voice steady. "Thank you," he began. "When my late wife and I founded the Cole Foundation, our dream was simple: to make sure every child felt seen and supported, no matter where they came from. This school is proof that kindness builds stronger communities than competition ever could." Elena felt her throat tighten at his words. Every syllable carried sincerity, not the polished distance she had expected from a millionaire. After the speech, the crowd began to disperse into conversation again. Elena wandered to the refreshment table, her nerves tugging at her resolve. She picked up a cup of punch, then heard his voice behind her. "Miss Morgan." She turned. Andrew stood just a few feet away, the noise of the crowd fading as he approached. "You made it," he said. "I almost did not," she admitted with a shy smile. "Crowds are not really my thing." "They are not mine either," he said quietly. "But I am glad you came." They found themselves beside a display of student artwork. One painting caught his eye, a watercolor of a sunrise, bright and clumsy, signed Ben Cole, age 7. "He painted this," Andrew said, pride softening his tone. "He did," Elena replied. "He told me he misses his mom in the mornings. So we painted sunrises that day." Andrew looked at her for a long moment. "You see my son," he said simply. "Not many people do." Elena's cheeks warmed. Every child deserves to be seen. The music shifted to a slow melody. Parents and teachers began to move toward the center of the floor. Andrew hesitated, then extended his hand slightly. "Would you dance?" Elena blinked in surprise. "Here? Now?" He smiled. "Only if you want to." For a moment, she hesitated. Then she placed her hand in his. They moved slowly, almost uncertainly, beneath the soft light. Around them, the laughter and chatter blurred into a distant hum. When the song ended, he released her hand gently. "Thank you," he said, "for treating me like a person when you thought I was a janitor." Elena laughed softly. "You are welcome. And for what it is worth, I think you make a very convincing one." He chuckled, a sound low and genuine. Then someone called his name, and he turned reluctantly toward the stage again. As he walked away, Elena felt something shift inside her. The line between admiration and something deeper was beginning to blur. She looked around the glowing room, her reflection shimmering in the polished floor. For the first time that night, she felt she belonged not because of status or appearance, but because of the quiet truth she shared with the man who believed kindness could still change the world. The weekend after the gala, the halls of St. Augustine Elementary School returned to their usual rhythm. The glitter had been swept away, the banners taken down, and life went on as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Elena, everything felt a little different. She found herself replaying the evening in her mind the way Andrew's hand had felt steady in hers, the warmth in his eyes when he spoke about Ben, the quiet way he had thanked her before slipping back into the crowd. She had gone home that night smiling for no reason, and for the first time in months, she had woken up without dread pressing on her chest. By Monday morning, the sky was bright and clear. Children ran across the courtyard laughing, their winter scarves trailing like ribbons in the wind. Inside her classroom, Elena was rearranging the art supplies when a small knock came at the door. Ben stood there, grinning. "Miss Elena, Dad said I can stay after class today to help clean up the art room," he said eagerly. She smiled. "That is very kind of you, Ben, but you do not have to." "I want to," he insisted. "He said it is important to help people who help you." Her heart softened. "In that case, I would love your help." That afternoon, when the final bell rang and the other students hurried out, Ben stayed behind. Together they washed brushes, stacked watercolor trays, and wiped paint from the tables. The air was filled with the faint scent of soap and tempera paint. As they worked, Ben began talking about his father, how he traveled often for work, how he tried to make breakfast every Sunday morning, and how the pancakes always came out uneven. Elena laughed, listening carefully. "He misses your mom a lot, doesn't he?" she asked gently. Ben nodded, eyes thoughtful. "He does. Sometimes he sits by the window and talks to her picture. He thinks I do not see him, but I do." "Oh." The words pierced something in Elena's chest. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder. "You are a good son, Ben. Your mom would be very proud of you." A few moments later, there was a knock at the door. Andrew stood there, one hand in his pocket, his tie loosened after a long day. "So this is where my son disappeared to," he said lightly. "I hope he has not made too much of a mess." "Actually," Elena said with a smile, "he has been my best helper." Ben beamed. "We are done, Dad. Can we get ice cream?" Andrew nodded. "We can, but only if Miss Elena joins us." She hesitated, glancing between father and son. "Oh, I could not possibly." "Please," Ben pleaded. "You can get strawberry. Dad always gets vanilla. It is boring." Andrew laughed softly. "He is not wrong." Elena gave in with a smile. "All right, but just one scoop." They walked together to a small ice cream shop across from the park. The sun hung low, tinting the sky a soft orange. Ben ran ahead to choose flavors, leaving Elena and Andrew a few paces behind. "I think you have a new favorite teacher," Andrew said quietly. "I think I have a new favorite student," she replied. He looked at her then, not as a parent or a benefactor, but as a man seeing someone he had not expected to meet. "You are good with him," he said. "Better than most." She shook her head. "Ben makes it easy. He just needed someone to listen." Andrew nodded slowly. "We all do, sometimes." They reached the shop window, where Ben was already waving 2 dripping cones in the air. Elena laughed, and Andrew's eyes softened again. For a brief, perfect moment, the world felt simple, 3 people standing in the fading light, laughter spilling into the street. Neither of them said it out loud, but both felt it. Something real was beginning to grow. Something built not on wealth or status, but on quiet understanding, and the kind of kindness that truly is never wasted. The following week arrived with a burst of sunshine after days of winter gray. The city seemed softer somehow, as if the world itself had taken a long, deep breath. At St. Augustine Elementary School, the air buzzed with news. The local newspaper was featuring a story about the Cole Foundation's work with the district. Teachers chatted excitedly in the hallway, speculating about the article and what it might say about the school's funding. Elena had not thought much about it. Her days had been full and content, morning lessons, afternoon laughter, and small moments that warmed her heart. She had even begun sketching again in the evenings, something she had not done since college. Her favorite subject lately was a simple one: a boy holding his father's hand, walking beneath a banner that read, kindness is never wasted. But that peaceful rhythm shattered on Thursday morning. She had just started class when the principal hurried in, holding a folded newspaper. His expression was tense. "Miss Morgan," he said. "May I have a moment?" The children exchanged curious looks as Elena followed him into the hallway. He handed her the paper without a word. Across the front page was a headline: "Philanthropist Andrew Cole announces expansion of education initiative." Below it was a large photo taken at the gala. Andrew standing on stage, and right beside him, caught mid-laughter, was Elena. Her breath caught. The caption read, "Mr. Cole seen sharing a moment with a teacher rumored to have inspired his latest project." Her stomach twisted. "Rumored?" she repeated. The principal sighed. "I am afraid some people are talking. A few parents called this morning, asking about your relationship with Mr. Cole. You know how people are when it comes to gossip." Elena felt her face burn. There is nothing inappropriate. He is just—" "I know, Miss Morgan," the principal interrupted gently. "You have done nothing wrong. But the board is very cautious about appearances. For now, it might be best to keep some distance until things settle." She nodded, throat tight. When she returned to her classroom, the children were whispering. Someone had already pulled up the article on a phone. She forced a smile and began the next lesson, but her voice trembled. After school, she walked home through the drizzle, her umbrella forgotten somewhere along the way. She could not stop seeing that photo, the easy laughter, the warmth in his eyes. Something that had felt so simple was now being twisted into scandal. That evening, her phone buzzed. It was Andrew. "Elena," he said quietly when she answered. "I just saw the article. I am so sorry. I never wanted this to affect you." She hesitated, staring at the raindrops on her window. "They think I used you," she whispered. "They think I am some kind of opportunist." "You are not," he said firmly. "Anyone who knows you would never believe that." "But they do not know me," she replied, "and I cannot afford to lose this job." There was silence on the line. Then Andrew spoke softly. "I will fix this, I promise." "Please do not," she said quickly. "If you do anything, it will only make things worse. Just let it fade." He exhaled, defeated. "All right, but for what it is worth, I do not regret any of it." Elena closed her eyes. "Neither do I." When the call ended, she stood there for a long time, the city lights flickering beyond the rain. Somewhere inside, she knew the truth was catching up to them. The kindness that had brought them together was now being tested in the harsh light of judgment, and soon, the world would see who Andrew Cole really was. By Monday morning, the storm had grown louder. The photo from the gala had spread beyond the local paper and onto social media. Parents whispered in the parking lot, and teachers exchanged careful looks in the lounge. What had once been a harmless evening of laughter was now painted as scandal. Elena walked into her classroom and felt the shift immediately. Conversations hushed when she passed. A few students' parents had already requested classroom transfers. She kept her head high, pretending not to notice, but inside her stomach twisted with shame she did not deserve. That afternoon, the principal called her into his office. He looked weary, his hands folded on the desk. "Miss Morgan," he began gently, "you are an excellent teacher. But the board is pressuring me. They want to avoid controversy." She felt her throat close. "Are you saying I am being dismissed?" "Just placed on leave," he said softly. "Until things clear up, you will still be paid for the next 2 weeks." Her voice cracked. 2 weeks? He sighed. "I am truly sorry." When she left the office, the hallways seemed to stretch endlessly, the laughter of children echoing from a world she no longer belonged to. She packed her belongings in silence, chalk, notebooks, the small frame drawing that said, "Thank you, Miss Elena." She lingered for a long moment by the board, where her favorite words were still written faintly in white dust. "Kindness is never wasted." As she erased them, her hands trembled. Outside, the sky had turned gray again. Rain began to fall just as she stepped through the school gate. A black sedan pulled up beside the curb. Andrew stepped out, holding an umbrella. "Elena," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Why did you not tell me? I just heard about the suspension." She shook her head, eyes wet. "Because there is nothing you can do. The more you defend me, the more they will think I need saving. You should not have to face this alone, he said firmly. I do not want your pity, Andrew, she snapped, then immediately softened. I am sorry. I worked so hard to be here. I thought I finally found where I belonged. He took a step closer. You still do. You belong where people see your heart. She looked away, fighting tears. That is not this place. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain fell harder, drumming against the umbrella, washing the color from the world around them. Finally, she whispered, maybe this was all a mistake. Andrew's expression tightened. You do not mean that. I do, she said, her voice breaking. You and I come from different worlds. I cannot be the reason your reputation suffers. Before he could answer, she turned and walked away, the rain soaking through her coat. Andrew stood frozen, watching her disappear down the street. That night, he sat alone in his office overlooking the city skyline, the glow of the lights reflecting in the glass. On his desk lay the same newspaper clipping that had started it all. He stared at the photo, Elena laughing beside him, and felt a hollow ache in his chest. For years, he had been surrounded by people who praised his success, but never spoke to his soul. And just when he had found someone who did, he had lost her to the noise of gossip and fear. In the quiet, his phone buzzed with a message from his son. Dad, Miss Elena said, kindness is never wasted. Does that mean we will see her again? Andrew typed slowly, his eyes stinging. Yes, Ben, I promise. He closed his eyes and made a vow to himself. If kindness truly was never wasted, then he would prove it no matter what it cost. A week later, the annual Spring of Hope charity event filled the downtown art center with laughter, music, and camera flashes. It was a night dedicated to celebrating the Cole Foundation's newest scholarship program, a project Andrew had quietly named the Kindness Initiative. The press had been buzzing about it for days, speculating what inspired such a heartfelt campaign from the usually reserved Millionaire. Elena knew nothing about the event. She had been spending her days quietly, applying for new teaching positions, trying not to think about what she had lost. Her small apartment was filled with silence and unanswered questions. Until that evening, when a letter arrived in her mailbox. It was printed on thick ivory paper, embossed with gold. Dear Miss Morgan, you are warmly invited to attend the unveiling of a special educational project this Saturday at 7 o'clock in the evening. Your presence would mean the world. There was no signature, but she knew exactly who had sent it. Her heart pounded as she stood outside the art center that night. The hall glowed with soft light and the quiet hum of anticipation. Guests mingled beneath tall banners that read, The Kindness Initiative, a Legacy of Learning. She slipped inside, uncertain, and stayed near the back of the crowd. Then the lights dimmed. Andrew stepped onto the stage. He looked calm, composed, his voice steady through the microphone. Tonight, he said, we celebrate more than numbers or donations. We celebrate the people who remind us that kindness, no matter how small, can change everything. This program was inspired by someone who taught me that the truest generosity asks for nothing in return. A large curtain behind him lifted, revealing a painting Elena's own sketch from her classroom wall. It showed a child and a teacher standing under the words, Kindness is never wasted. Gasps filled the room. A plaque beneath the painting read, The Elena Morgan Scholarship for Compassion in Education. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as Andrew continued. Because of her, hundreds of students will now have the chance to learn, to dream, and to be seen for who they are. He looked out over the crowd, and then his gaze found hers. Miss Morgan, he said softly into the microphone, thank you for reminding me what truly matters. Oh, the audience turned, following his eyes until they found her standing near the back, motionless and overwhelmed. Applause rose around her like a tide. For the first time in weeks, she smiled through her tears. The kindness she had thought was lost had come full circle, and it was shining brighter than ever. When the applause finally faded, Andrew stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted as he walked toward her, the soft hum of the string quartet filling the air. Elena stood frozen near the edge of the hall, her heart pounding with every step he took. You should not have done this, she whispered when he reached her. You did not have to use my name. I wanted to, he said simply. It was never about publicity. It was about setting the record straight. You lost your job because you stood up for kindness. I could not let the world forget that." She shook her head, tears threatening to spill again. "Andrew, you risked everything for me." "No." He smiled softly. "No. You reminded me what everything was for." The room had quieted, guests pretending not to watch. He took her hand gently, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Ben misses you. He keeps asking if Miss Elena will come back." Her lips trembled. "I miss him too." "Then come back," Andrew said. "Not just to teach, but to stay. The foundation board has reinstated your position. You have your classroom again if you still want it." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "How did you—" "Because the truth has a way of finding light," he said. "And so do you." For a moment, the world seemed to blur the lights, the murmurs, the music. All she could see was the man who had once held a mop in his hand and a quiet strength in his eyes. She laughed softly through her tears. "You know, when I met you, I thought you were the janitor. And you treated me better than most people treat a millionaire," he said, smiling. "That is how I knew." "Oh." He reached into his pocket and revealed a small silver pendant shaped like a chalkboard. Engraved on it were the words, "Kindness is never wasted." "I had this made for you," he said. A reminder of how it all began. Elena's fingers closed around it gently. "It is beautiful." "It is true," he replied. "Every word." At that moment, Ben ran up to them from the crowd, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "Miss Elena, are you coming back to class?" She knelt to his level, tears glistening. "Yes, Ben, I am coming home." Andrew placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let us start over together." She nodded, smiling through the emotion that tightened her chest. As the music swelled, Andrew wrapped his arm around her, and together they looked up at the painting, the same words shining above them like a promise. Kindness is never wasted. It was no longer just a quote on a classroom wall. It was their story born from a mistake, redeemed by truth, and sealed by love that asked for nothing but honesty in return. And for the first time, Elena Morgan believed in forever.